I'm still testing. I probably don't need that if this works.
Try that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Very good. Well, all right, now, I'm obviously talking about corporatising the natural resource. The argument that I'm coming from, and I make no bones about it, is that I am a great supporter of owner-operator farmers. And I think if you look around the world, if you want food quality and you want some honesty and integrity about the quality of that food, it comes back to individuals who are accountable for it. And if you look at corporate examples around the world where individuals are taken out and it becomes a company exercise, in nearly all cases it's a disappointment. And where it's happening in Australia, of course, and particularly in the Murray-Darling Basin, and I'm not talking about forestry, I'm talking about producing almonds or walnuts or grapes, etc. The same things are happening, some pretty ordinary production standards and some pretty ordinary environmental outcomes, which I'm sure we'll all hear about in the future. I'm really talking about sustainable natural resource allocation, and I want you to think about that with the backdrop of what's happening and what is going to happen on this planet in the next 50 years. And I find it really interesting that years ago I started talking about the world's food supply being endangered. Now you will notice that the press is now running that regularly. I also probably didn't say things about population because that was politically incorrect. Now I find that really hard because I am politically incorrect. And when I say some of the things I say tonight, I really hope that if you're uncomfortable with them, you ask me. In fact, the greatest value tonight will be asking me why I have the attitudes I've got. It is generally, the general consensus is that by 2050, the world's population is going to peak at 9 billion. It's about 6.5 billion now. That is the best case scenario. That is apparently based on globalisation, the optimum utilisation of the natural resource, and the fact that as people's standards of living rise, so their fertility falls. Now if those preconditions bomb out, well maybe it'll be 12 billion. To be perfectly honest, we're overpopulated now. Okay? I just draw the example of two Victorian premiers. Mr Bracks has repeatedly said that Melbourne could do with another 1 million people. Mr Brumby is now saying, I can see the traffic logjam that is happening day in and day out is because of population. I'm sorry, I can't quite fix it in a hurry. This is going to take massive infrastructure expenditure. All within a changeover of premiers. Now, blind Freddie can see that there is an optimum level of population and beyond which it is not a really good look. And I think if you spend any time in Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane or most of the other parts of the world, we're there. If you work on the 9 billion population surge, roughly we've got to double the food supply. Just when climate change becomes an issue. Now, food supply, and it leads me on to Malthus. Malthus was a scientist who, back in the 60s, I think, might have been the 50s, was outrageous enough to say the world's fine up. If you keep populating, you're going to run out of resources like water, all your major elements, etc., etc. He was howled down. We knew better. We were a species that could fix anything with science and innovation. Back in the 80s, we increased our agricultural output. It was called the Green Revolution, I think, and it was all about new science and improved technology in doing the things we do. We are now at the situation where the population pressure is such that they're now talking about having to go into the next phase, which is genetic modification. In other words, every time we got a gain to get a surplus, we blew it. We're now in this situation. Now, genetic modification, there are lots of people in farming who think it's their saviour. I put it bluntly, I'm not going to buy any genetically modified food. And you might notice that over the years I've been campaigning on this issue. I've been in Canberra and in the press, etc., on pesticides, the contamination in water, cancer figures, etc., through the full spectrum. I've dealt with people like the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medical Authority, etc., etc. If there's one message I'd like to get across to you, if you think any of the authorities are actually doing the things they should be doing, then leave the tooth in the glass next to your bedside and maybe something will happen.